Imagine playing D&D with someone so toxic, so utterly unbearable, that it takes your entire group 2 full years to finally kick them out. 2 years of ruined sessions, harassment, and the most ridiculous Mary Sue characters you've ever seen. This is the story of Sue. And trust me, it only gets worse from here. Our group had been playing together for a while. Good people, good vibes, the kind of table where everyone's laughing and the stories just flow naturally. We had 6 regular players and 2 DMS who rotated between campaigns. Everything was great. The cast was solid. There was Eli, our youngest player, quiet but enthusiastic. Kaija, who played these wild feral tiefling characters. Tyler, the creative one. Rhonda, steady and reliable. Carly, who'd recently joined and fit right in. And Stefan, one of our DMS who ran this incredible homebrew world. Then we had to replace a player who'd been kicked for being a creep. A friend of a friend knew someone who was looking for a group. Sue, she seemed nice enough at first, eager, enthusiastic, ready to play. She talked about how much she loved storytelling and character development. We were happy to have her. The red flags started almost immediately, but like most D&D groups we were too polite to say anything, too willing to give the benefit of the doubt, and that politeness would cost us 2 entire years. Part 1. Sue's first character was an assassin, not just any assassin, mind you, a sniper assassin with a crossbow who lurked on rooftops and solved every single problem with violence. Diplomacy, violence, investigation, violence, shopping at the market, believe it or not, also violence. The character had no personality beyond being edgy and dangerous, no backstory worth mentioning, just a crossbow and an attitude, but we figured okay, some people like playing combat-focused characters, no big deal. Then another player tried to start a sweet little romance subplot between 2 characters. Nothing crazy, just some flirting at a tavern. Sue's assassin walked over, drew her weapon, and shut the entire thing down. She knocked aside the flowers, threatened the other character, and made it very clear that romance was not going to happen at this table. Not in her campaign, even though it absolutely was not her campaign. The rest of us exchanged looks. But hey, maybe she was just getting into character, right? Maybe she'd settle in and find her groove. She did not settle in, she did not find her groove. For our next campaign, a series of connected one-shots that I was running, Sue rolled up a monk. A human monk with a sweet, childlike voice and an innocent demeanor. On the surface, she was this dainty, gentle soul who wouldn't hurt a fly. She spoke softly, acted timid, and seemed like the most harmless character at the table. Except that was all an act. Behind that sweet smile was a character that was secretly manipulative, calculating, and genuinely predatory. Sue played her with this unsettling duality, where one moment she'd be speaking in a baby voice, and the next she'd be doing something deeply disturbing. She'd manipulate NPCs with fake innocence, then turn around and do something shockingly cruel when nobody was looking. It made everyone at the table uncomfortable. Not the fun kind of uncomfortable where you're engaged with the story and enjoying the tension, the real kind, where you're wondering if you should say something but don't want to make it weird. And then came the epilogue. During the final session wrap-up, where everyone was describing what their characters did after the adventure, Sue forced a romantic relationship between her monk and another player character's daughter. She just announced it was happening. Mid-epilogue, without any build-up, without asking, without consent, the other player looked completely blindsided. They opened their mouth to say something, then just closed it again. Nobody stopped her. That's how it always worked with Sue. She'd push a boundary, everyone would freeze, and by the time anyone thought to object, it was already done and we'd all moved on. Then came the druid, a tiefling who immediately appointed herself party leader on day 1. Not through roleplay, not through natural group dynamics, not by earning anyone's respect. She just declared it. And from that moment on, Sue used this character to boss everyone around, criticize their choices, and establish herself as the unquestioned authority at the table. Her favorite target was Eli. Eli was our youngest player, a quiet kid who just wanted to play his human rogue and have a good time. He wasn't confrontational. He didn't push back, and Sue zeroed in on that like a shark smelling blood. Sue's druid was relentlessly cruel to him. She'd mock his character's decisions in front of everyone. She'd undermine him during important moments. She'd use racial slurs against his character, slurs about his rogue being human in a party of exotic races, and call it roleplay. She treated him like he was beneath her, and honestly it didn't feel like it was just the characters anymore. It felt personal. It got so bad that Eli's girlfriend, who had recently joined the table specifically to spend time with Eli and see what D&D was all about, quietly packed up her things one session and left. She didn't make a scene. She just stood up, gathered her stuff and walked out. She couldn't stand watching Sue tear into her boyfriend anymore. She never came back. We lost a player because of Sue. A real, actual person left our table because of one player's behavior, and we still kept playing, because that's what groups do, right? They tolerate things way too long because nobody wants to be the one to start a confrontation. Sue's next character was a paladin, a chaste, holy warrior dedicated to purity and righteousness. On paper, it sounded like an improvement, a lawful good character who follows a strict moral code. Maybe Sue was turning over a new leaf. She was not turning over a new leaf. The character had suspicious armor details that didn't quite fit the chaste aesthetic. There were subtle bondage references woven into her backstory that made you do a double take when you read them. And then the real problem surfaced, because Sue started sexually harassing Eli. She would make suggestive comments about Eli's tiefling monk character from the previous campaign. She'd lean too close to him at the table, invading his personal space. She'd make remarks about what his character looked like under his armor, what he'd be like in certain situations. She pushed boundaries that had absolutely no business being pushed, especially with someone who was clearly already uncomfortable from months of being her target. Eli, who had already endured months of Sue's druid bullying him relentlessly, finally had enough. One session he quietly packed up his character sheet, said he was done, and left the campaign entirely. Let me say that again because I need you to understand how messed up this is. A player was harassed out of the game by another player, directly, repeatedly, over the course of months. First bullied, then sexually harassed, and we still didn't kick Sue out. We just let Eli walk away, and the empty chair at the table was a constant reminder of our collective failure to act. Part 2. Year 2 began with my Underdark campaign, and Sue brought what she clearly considered her magnum opus. A blind drow wizard with bladesong, silver-white hair flowing past her shoulders, pure white, unseeing eyes, the youngest daughter of a powerful matriarch family. She had a small owl familiar with golden glowing eyes that perched on her shoulder at all times. On paper, it was actually a cool concept, a blind spellcaster navigating the Underdark through magic and instinct. In practice, it was the most insufferable character any of us had ever encountered. From session 1, Sue made it absolutely clear that her blind drow wizard was the main character of the campaign. Not a main character. The main character. Every scene had to revolve around her. When Tyler's druid was having a meaningful conversation with an NPC about the druid's history in the Underdark, Sue's wizard would interrupt to announce something about her own backstory. When Rhonda's cleric was having a touching moment helping an injured NPC, Sue would insert her character and take over the healing scene. She'd launch into unprompted 5-minute monologues about her tragic past while everyone else sat there with their dice in their hands, waiting for their turn that never came. If the spotlight wasn't on her for more than 5 minutes, she'd find a way to yank it back. A sudden vision, a mysterious pain, a cryptic message from her patron, anything to make the scene about her again. The rest of the party slowly became supporting characters in the Sue show, and we were all getting too exhausted to fight it anymore. And then it got darker. Despite playing a supposedly good-aligned character, Sue's wizard had a disturbing love of cruelty. She'd threatened to torture NPCs for information with gleeful enthusiasm, describing in uncomfortable detail what she'd do to them. She made tentacle jokes at every possible opportunity, working them into conversations where they absolutely did not belong. She once interrogated a bound prisoner with such obvious delight that the rest of the party broke character to express genuine discomfort. But the real problem started when she turned her attention to Carly's half-orc ranger. Carly had recently joined our group and was still finding her footing. Her character, a half-orc ranger, was young, barely an adult in the story. Sue's drow wizard was 280 years old. The age gap alone was deeply uncomfortable, but Sue didn't just flirt casually. She played it with this intense, predatory energy, leaning in close at the campfire scenes, making suggestive comments about the ranger's physique, pushing past every social cue that Carly was trying to disengage from the conversation. Carly, the actual player at the table, was visibly uncomfortable. You could see it in her body language, in the way she'd lean back in her chair, in the nervous laughs that weren't really laughs. We could all see it, and yet somehow Sue either didn't notice or simply didn't care. Here's the thing about Sue's blind wizard that drove us absolutely insane. She had low hit points. She was a wizard, a squishy backline caster who should have been standing behind the fighter and throwing spells from a safe distance. But Sue insisted on charging into melee combat with a rapier, every single fight. She had bladesong, sure, But that didn't change the fact that she was still a wizard with wizard hit points trying to be a frontline fighter. She'd rush in, get surrounded by enemies, and then everything would fall apart. Because every time she got hit, and she got hit constantly because that's what happens when a wizard stands next to 3 orcs, Sue would get upset. Not in character upset. Actually genuinely upset at the table. She'd complain that the enemies were targeting her unfairly. She'd argue that the combat encounters were too hard. She'd insist that I, as the DM, was specifically trying to kill her character, as if I had some personal vendetta against her blind drow. One session her character dropped to critically low health after charging into 3 orcs with nothing but a rapier and a dream, and Sue had an actual panic attack at the table, not an in-character dramatic moment, a real, genuine panic attack. Her breathing got fast, she started shaking, she couldn't focus. Over hit points, in a game of pretend. The rest of us had to stop the entire session to deal with Sue's emotional breakdown, while our characters stood frozen mid-combat somewhere in the Underdark. We spent 30 minutes calming her down, while a perfectly good gaming session evaporated around us. Sue also had a unique relationship with puzzles, which is to say, she hated them with every fiber of her being. If she couldn't solve a puzzle by casting a single spell, she'd get frustrated, check out, and drag the entire session down with her. There was this one time the party encountered an ancient stone door covered in glowing runes. It was a classic dungeon puzzle. Levers, rotating stones, pressure plates. The kind of thing that makes D&D fun. The rest of the party figured it out pretty quickly and was ready to move on. But Sue's wizard kept casting spells at the door. Detect magic, dispel magic, knock, identify, arcane eye, one after another. None of them worked because it wasn't that kind of puzzle. It was a physical puzzle, not a magical one. The rest of the party stood there for 20 minutes, some of them literally with their hands on the correct levers, waiting for Sue to accept that her character couldn't just magic her way through everything in the world. 20 minutes of us standing there, watching her cast spells at a door, while the actual solution was right there the entire time. Part 3. Meanwhile, Stefan started running a new campaign on the side. A fresh story, a new setting, a chance for everyone to play different characters, and Sue naturally played a paladin. Again, but this one was different, she said. This paladin had anger issues and a dark past. She wanted her paladin to fall from grace and reclass into something darker. She had it all planned out. The paladin picked fights with absolutely everything. NPCs, party members, furniture, you name it. She had a massive blow-up with Kaija's feral tiefling ranger right in the middle of camp one night. A screaming match that escalated into a near-combat situation. Sparks were flying, literally, because tieflings. Other party members backed away. The camp went silent. It could have been a cool, dramatic moment. Characters in conflict can create amazing stories when handled well, but this wasn't character-driven drama. This was Sue looking for an excuse to throw a tantrum and call it roleplay. You could tell because the argument made no sense. The ranger hadn't done anything wrong. Sue just wanted a fight. And then, out of pure petulant spite, Sue changed her character. She dropped the paladin overnight and rolled up a warlock. Not because it served the story. Not because she had an interesting character arc in mind. She was angry at the other players for not siding with her during the blow-up, and she wanted to be as difficult as humanly possible. Her warlock was a mess. Unfocused build, nonsensical backstory, abilities chosen seemingly at random. Even her patron demon looked embarrassed to be involved. It was a character built entirely out of spite, and everyone at the table knew it. Nobody said anything, of course. We never said anything. The warlock lasted about 2 sessions before Sue got bored of her own tantrum and swapped back to the paladin. Because of course she did. The dark arc she'd planned never happened. It was just a week-long sulk in character form. But the absolute worst part of Stefan's campaign was Sue's obsession with my character, my tiefling rogue. My rogue was in a relationship with Kaija's feral tiefling ranger. A normal, sweet, in-game romance. Low-key, no drama, just 2 characters who genuinely liked each other and expressed it in small moments. A shared glance across the campfire, watching each other's backs in combat. It was one of those organic things that makes a campaign special. Sue's paladin became fixated on my rogue. Not in a fun, dramatic tension way that could have been interesting. In a deeply uncomfortable, obsessive way. She'd watch him from across camp with this intense stare that Sue would describe in detail. She'd make comments about him when he wasn't around, talking about him to other characters as if he was some kind of prize. She'd get visibly jealous whenever my rogue interacted with the ranger, making snide remarks or dramatically leaving scenes. Someone at the table later described it as a constant temptation, like a piece of candy she couldn't eat. And that's exactly what it felt like from my side of the table. This suffocating, unwanted attention that turned every scene with Sue's paladin into a minefield. You never knew when the obsession would flare up and derail whatever was happening. After 2 full years of this, after watching Eli leave after the druid's bullying, the monk's predatory behavior, the melee wizard's panic attacks, the spite warlock, and the creepy obsession with my rogue, I finally did something about it. I created a new campaign group chat. I carefully, deliberately invited every single player. Tyler, Rhonda, Kaija, Carly, Stefan, every single one. Except Sue. And the floodgates opened. Within hours, the chat exploded. Everyone had stories. Everyone had complaints they'd been holding back for months, for years. Things they'd never said out loud because nobody wanted to be the one to rock the boat. Tyler talked about how Sue's characters derailed every story arc he tried to build. He'd spent hours preparing character moments that Sue would hijack within minutes. Rhonda described being talked over session after session, her cleric reduced to a background extra in the Sue show. Kaija was sick of the constant romantic aggression toward her character, the weird jealousy, the blow-ups over nothing. Carly finally opened up about how genuinely uncomfortable and unsafe the flirting had made her feel. And Stefan, our long-suffering DM, had a list of grievances going back to month 1 that he'd been bottling up, because he thought he was the only one who felt that way. Every single person at that table had been suffering in silence. For 2 years, because nobody wanted to be the bad guy. Nobody wanted to be the one who ruined the group dynamic by calling out the person who was actually ruining the group dynamic. 2 years of pent-up frustration came pouring out in one group chat in one single night. The next session was electric with tension. Sue could feel something was off the moment she walked in. The energy in the room had shifted. People were quieter than usual, more reserved. Eye contact was different. Something was coming, and everyone except Sue knew exactly what it was. So Sue did what Sue always did when she sensed tension. She doubled down. She acted up. She pushed buttons. She tested every boundary she could find, playing her character louder and more obnoxiously than ever, as if daring someone to finally say something. Stefan, our DM, who had endured 2 years of patience, 2 years of managing her outbursts, 2 years of making excuses and smoothing things over, finally snapped. His voice changed. His demeanor shifted. 2 years of frustration condensed into a single moment of clarity. Sue saw the writing on the wall. She looked around the table and for the first time seemed to notice that nobody was on her side. Nobody was laughing at her antics. Nobody was going along with it. She grabbed her bag, knocked her chair back, and left before the session was over. A dramatic exit because that's who Sue was. Everything, right up to the very end, had to be about her. After she left, the table sat in silence for a moment. Then we sent the message. Clear, formal, unanimous. Every single person at the table contributed to it. We explained that her behavior was unwelcome, that the harassment of Eli was unacceptable, that the main character syndrome, the emotional manipulation, the panic attacks used as leverage, the predatory flirting, the spite characters, all of it was too much, that we'd given her chance after chance after chance, and nothing had ever changed. She was removed from both campaigns, blocked on all social media. The door was closed, locked, and the key was thrown into a very deep well. Was it harsh? Maybe. Was it 2 years overdue? Absolutely. The thing about toxic players is that they rely on your politeness. They count on the fact that nobody at the table wants to be the one to start drama. They exploit the unspoken social contract that says we should all just get along and work things out. And they use that contract as a shield while they make everyone else miserable. But sometimes getting along means standing up for the people at your table who can't stand up for themselves. Sometimes being a good friend means having an uncomfortable conversation. And sometimes, the most important role you make isn't the one with the dice. Outro. And you know what happened after Sue was gone. The games got better immediately. Not gradually, not over time, immediately. That table that had spent 2 years walking on eggshells. Players started laughing again. Real laughing, not nervous laughing. Characters took risks because nobody was afraid of being overshadowed or mocked. Stories went in wild, unexpected directions because nobody was worried about Sue hijacking every single scene. The golden age returned, dice rolled freely. Adventures were fun again. Eli even came back eventually once he heard Sue was gone. And that empty chair where Sue used to sit, it didn't stay empty for long, because it turns out when your table is healthy and welcoming and fun, people actually want to be there. Sometimes the hardest thing about D&D isn't fighting the dragon. It isn't solving the puzzle or surviving the dungeon. It's looking across the table at a toxic player and finding the courage to say, You're not welcome here anymore. And sometimes you wait 2 years too long to do it. If you're in a group with a Sue right now, don't wait. Don't let it go another session. Don't let another Eli walk away. Life is way too short for bad D&D.